All right, we should be recording.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Denise, would you like me to start over or would you like me to continue where I was?
We had one other slide before this that would be great to start with, I think. Explaining the programming. Yes.
I can just start right here.
Yes, please. I'm so sorry.
That's A-okay. I'm glad that you stopped me. I forgot about the recording thing.
Yeah.
So I'm Dehart Faltico, a program coordinator with the Climate and Energy Project, and I'm here to talk today about the Kansas Climate Corps and how a systems-based approach to our integrated voter engagement and civic participation can lend itself to some long-term solutions for the work that we do. So first, a little bit about the Climate and Energy Project. Climate and Energy Project, or CEP, as you will hear me refer to it as, builds resilience in Kansas through equitable clean energy solutions and climate action. And we do that primarily through a few different strategies that we employ. We connect people, organizations, and ideas. We present science-based facts. We facilitate critical thinking and community engagement. And we co-create equitable and productive solutions. A little bit of historical context about that. We got our start in 2007, primarily around finding clean energy solutions for Kansas. And then in 2015, we adjusted our mission to include the equity piece and about finding equitable clean energy solutions, basically to build a resilient Kansas. And the equity work has been critical, as we have seen, especially, for instance, like the pandemic last year. The pandemic really highlighted the nexus or the intersection between climate impact and public health in a lot of different ways. And one example of that could be around not necessarily the pandemic, but as energy rates have been getting higher and higher, and there have been subpar energy efficiency programs for Kansans and available to Kansans. Low-income families have been spending a higher and higher percentage of their incomes or of their monthly spend on their utility bills, and not having access to equitable clean energy technologies then consistently keeps those communities at a disadvantage. So we see that embedding equity into our work as being absolutely critical to the work moving forward, because social justice and environmental justice are so closely linked. And that kind of lends itself to talk a little bit about the systems-based approach that we use. Systems-based thinking is definitely not linear. It's definitely non-linear. It can be circular at times. It can definitely take longer than just implementing a program and then implementing another program. But we feel by having a systems-based approach, we can create sustainable long-term solutions that will create deeper community engagement. And like I said, be sustainable over the long term as opposed to one-off. So a little bit before we go into the Kansas Climate Corps, I want to talk specifically about CEP's programming, because we're trying to overlay our civic engagement work over all of the programming that we do. So I want to make sure that you all have a background into what we do. And you can divide it into two different buckets with two each, so 4 buckets total. One's around climate resilience, one's clean energy, one's policy, and then civic participation. So as we dig into each of those, the first one, climate resilience, it really works and anchors its work around protecting our wealth resources, so water, energy, air, land, transportation, and health. And we have the Kansas Wealth Collaborative that works with partner organizations that are also working across Kansas to protect and preserve these wealth resources. And these organizations in the collaboration work together to co-create solutions to effectively preserve these resources, and then overall achieve the shared goal of creating a healthier and more resilient Kansas. So a couple of specific programs within that is the Kansas Climate and Health Declaration, and that is an advocacy tool that really allows us to speak around and educate on the links between climate impact and public health. And so far we have 42 organizations and 670 individuals that have signed on to that declaration, and we're growing. So the second thing on there, water and energy progress, really speaks to the role that agriculture can play in mitigating climate impacts and in putting forth some co-created solutions around stewardship, both for clean energy and water. And so our water and energy progress program has in the past highlighted farmers that are doing just that, that are really innovative around their stewardship and practices that they employ on their farms to, again, protect some of these resources around water and energy. And then the last thing that you see on this slide is REAMP. And REAMP is a regional network that works to equitably decarbonize the Midwest by 2050. So looking at getting fossil fuels out of the Midwest by 2050. And it's a huge North Star goal, but the way that it works is it creates a network of organizations across a number of different Midwest states that work in collaboration across the entire region or in collaborations within their state tables, so groups grouped by state, to come together to find diverse opportunities and to create diverse solutions across a broad range of sectors and areas that ultimately have the end goal of getting fossil fuels out of our Midwest region. And we're really excited. So one of the ways that REAMP works is by having what are called state tables. And each state table is a set of organizations that are operating at state level to do the same thing within their state, but then they join the nexus of the entire regional network to grow that impact across the region. And we are really excited that this year we're going to be standing up our Kansas Wealth State Table. And again, that's going to include our wealth partners, but we're also seeking a number of other partners to, again, help co-create these solutions and help get fossil fuels out of the Midwest and out of our state in an equitable manner, ultimately by 2050. So we're really excited about that work. And if you want more information about that, I can give you some more about that during the Q&A. The next thing is around clean energy. And a lot of this work is, it's in solar and wind energy efficiency, and then through our Climate Energy Business Council. So, we have done a lot of work in and around solar and what we call distributed generation and the clean energy opportunities that exist with solar. Through a variety of different campaigns, we educate the public on solar and the benefits of using solar, and we also work to try to help make having solar in the state of Kansas a cost-effective option for residents. And that's through like our Save Kansas Solar campaign, for example. For our work in the wind sector, our wind energy work, I will say that Kansas leads the nation, is one of the nation's leaders in wind energy production. And we have reduced our carbon emissions by 40% because of that increase since 2001. And that is, our work is going to continue to grow. And some of the ways in which we work in that is, for example, we just recently hosted, or co-hosted, I should say, a series of 5 different workshops around wind energy with landowners and subject matter experts, kind of around all things and questions around wind energy, including impacts on public health, impacts on property values, impacts on wildlife, and so on and so forth. Energy efficiency and the work that we do around that, energy efficiency is really critical, and it can sometimes be an overlooked part of the clean energy transition. Energy efficiency is how we can use less energy to produce the same amount of products or services or have the same level of amenities. And so by increasing our energy efficiency, we can obviously reduce our carbon emissions and reduce our use of fossil fuels to achieve, again, the same amount of production or to have the same cooling in our homes, for example, on a hot summer day. Right now, Kansas does not have a very robust energy efficiency program or energy efficiency programs for homeowners and for renters. And so a lot of times we will work in the legislative arena, and I can talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes to help promote that work. And a lot of this work comes in tandem with our Clean Energy Business Council. And the Clean Energy Business Council is a series of partners that are businesses across the state of Kansas that are working in clean energy. And the Clean Energy Business Council provides, they're the subject matter experts in what they do. They provide a lot of expertise at the State House. They often will provide expertise in submitting testimonies on bills and statutes that are in during the Kansas legislative session. And they can also provide, what's the word I'm looking for? They can also provide like expertise when, and get kind of consulting, if you will, around municipalities, clean energy transition plans, and so on and so forth. And then we also work in policy. And, you know, I can go quickly through this. You know, we work at the federal state, excuse me, we don't work at the federal level, but we do track what's happening nationally at the federal level. And while we don't have an active presence in Washington, we do partner with some organizations that are present in Washington. We are very active at the state level. And then, like I mentioned, at the local level, we can be subject matter experts or provide some consulting and content or review, for example, clean energy plans that are put out by municipalities or by counties. We do lots of work during the legislative session to educate the public about what's going on and to work with lawmakers, both during the legislative session and outside of the legislative session, to help educate them around clean energy policy and ways that they can support it, and to push back when there is pushback that we feel is supporting the efforts to move towards a transition to clean energy. And then probably one of the biggest ways that's kind of at the forefront of my mind right now in terms of how we work in policy is with the Kansas Corporation Commission. So the Kansas Corporation Commission is comprised of administrative staff and then a 3-member governor appointed board. And they oversee the investor-owned utilities and they regulate the investor-owned utilities. And so they really have a lot of impact on energy policy and how that impacts our lived experiences as homeowners, as business owners, and how the power that we use and the energy that we use is sourced, and they have a huge impact on all of it. So we will often intervene in dockets or provide input on those dockets and seek input from the public where we can around dockets that are in front of the Kansas Corporation Commission that have to do with energy and clean energy. And then the last bucket is civic participation. And that's where I'm going to spend most of my time today. And, you know, in general, it is our integrated voter engagement that we are trying to overlay over all of the other work. The face of that is the Kansas Climate Corps, but then there is also a kind of a sub-program under that, or that we're lumping into that, of Kansas Environmental Leadership. And then the social cohesion is around its intersection, you know, the intersection of the work that we do with the social justice component, and making sure that what we're doing very intentionally and in an equitable manner, and making sure that we have all of the voices at the table that need to be at the table. So I want to get started. I will say, if you have any questions, I'm unable to see the chat based off of just how my screen is working. But if you do have any questions, please drop them in the chat. And then Denise, if you want to, I can just pause momentarily and see if there's any questions that have come up so far, and then I can continue to do that as we go along. So are there any questions at this time?
No, there aren't currently.
Okay, great. Well, then I will keep going. So integrated voter engagement, as we get into that, I want to just give a kind of a quick definition. You know, in general, integrated voter engagement can be defined as a year-round program that connects voter engagement to issue-based organizing to build power, sustainability, and impact over multiple election cycles. And that definition comes from a woman by the name of Christy Pascal. And she was at Wellstone and actually, while she was at Wellstone, provided some integrated voter engagement training for us. And I really like that definition of it. It helps kind of distinguish between traditional voter engagement work and kind of the more systems-based approach of integrated voter engagement work. You can look at it as being more of a long-term power building effort that incorporates shorter term election cycle components, but then also works on the system in other ways and kind of pulls and tugs and other levers in other directions. So I want to get a little bit more into that. But before I do, I just want to give, like, I love this graphic. I think it's really helpful to see what kind of a difference in how systems thinking might work versus some of the more linear thinking that we use in general as a society. So, you know, when you're talking about systems thinking, you are looking at the whole versus the individual parts. Systems thinking work can definitely be very non-linear as opposed to linear, which can definitely make it a little bit messy and complicated at times. You're looking at, rather than analyzing individual components, you're looking at how they synthesize together and how they respond as a whole unit rather than in their individual components. When you're looking at structures in a system, if you're looking at the structures as in and of themselves, they can be static, whereas systems thinking looks at them and how they interact with each other as processes in a more dynamic way. The people and the organizations and the inputs and the energies that go into systems thinking are often viewed more as networks rather than hierarchies. And systems thinking looks at the relationships between objects rather than the objects themselves. You know, and another way to look at it is there's a systems tool called the causal loop diagram, and this is just kind of an example of it. On the left side, you can see that inputs A and B might cause C to happen, which would then cause D to happen. But in a systems approach, you can see that inputs A might input into B, and that might lead to either D or C, and then those will have impacts in the rest of the system that then kind of goes back into a continuous feedback loop to go back to impacting and having an effect on A and B. So that's just kind of a little quick and dirty about some of the systems thinking work. But to bring it back to integrated voter engagement, we like to look at integrated voter engagement as a wheel. And the center of that wheel, or that hub, is that power building. So building the community power for long-term engagement around these different tenets. And then each spoke on the wheel is a different strategy or lever that we can push or exert some effort with or put our resources towards. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of the ways and some of the spokes, if you will, that we are focusing on, and then talk about how they all fit together. But to begin, the Kansas Climate Corps stands for Community Organizing for Resilience and Equity. And it's really the new face of CEP's integrated voter engagement work. It was formerly known as Climate and Energy Voters Take Action. And a little bit of historical context on that. You know, we've been doing at CEP civic engagement work since the beginning. But we didn't really cut our teeth with integrated voter engagement until we received a grant from the Kansas Health Foundation in 2017 with a number of 9 other organizations for integrated voter engagement work. And we all came together as a cohort and are doing this integrated voter engagement work, all in various different sectors and all in different ways, but we are all engaged in integrated voter engagement work as a cohort. Ours specifically is with the end goal of increasing voter awareness and engagement on the links between health, climate resilience, equity, and clean energy. So there are different ways that we can take action with the Kansas Climate Corps. So once you sign up to be a Corps member, people that sign up to be a Corps member will then be introduced to various ways that they can take action. But overall, what we're trying to do is exert pressure and put resources towards those various folks on the wheel so that as a whole, we're building power moving forward, and that power will be long-term, will be sustainable over the long term around community engagement and civic participation. So the first couple of ways that we are, if you think about the little segments on the wheel that we're looking at, is around organizing and mobilizing the communities and getting out the vote. And the first one I'm going to talk about is our partnership with the Environmental Voter Project. So the Environmental Voter Project is a national 501c3 that was founded by a gentleman by the name of Nathaniel Stinnett. And basically what it does is it finds likely environmentalists that are what are called low propensity voters, and then it seeks to convert them into active voters. Because what the data has shown that they have found at EVP is that the polls have shown that environmental issues and issues around climate resilience are not a high priority for voters. But polls also show that a majority of Americans in general support progressive environmental policies. So how can both of those things be true? The answer is because the people that are supporting, the vast majority of Americans that are supporting the environmental policies, simply, even if they're registered voters, and especially the registered voters, are simply not getting to the polls. And so what Mr. Stinnett argues, and I think it's brilliant, is that it's much easier to change a behavior than it is to change a perspective. So if these people already believe that progressive environmental policies need to be put into place, it's probably easier to go and get those people out to vote than it is to change someone's mind and turn them into an environmentalist. And so the entire effort of EVP, the Environmental Voter Project, is to find these low propensity voters that are registered voters but just simply aren't getting to the polls and turn them out to the polls. And one of the ways that they're doing that is through what's called a voter pledge. So we've partnered up with them and are offering what's called the Kansas Climate Voter Pledge. And you see it here, it's available on our website, and I can share that in the chat in a little bit. And basically, it is a pretty low risk way to commit to always voting and prioritizing climate issues. And what happens is when someone signs the pledge, then they receive information about upcoming local and state elections, where to find information about those elections, and just nudges on making sure that they're getting to the polls. And again, because our work is 501c3 and because the Environmental Voter Project is 501c3, I should definitely note that we never talk about who to vote for. We never talk about how to vote for a specific policy. All we do is encourage people to get to the polls. And I'm sure that you're all aware of that, but as a 501c3, you are not allowed to engage in that kind of political conversation. That has to be reserved for 501c4 organizations. And so again, we never tell you who to vote for or how to vote. We just say, hey, get to the polls, it's critical. Because it is, and it doesn't matter what you believe, it matters that your voice is being heard. So that's one of the ways that we work on it. The other way is that we partner with the Voter Network through their Voter to Voter program with Lindsay Begum. And I know that some of you are probably familiar with that, so I won't go too much into it, but it basically uses relational organizing and asks you to connect with your friends and family and talk about the importance of voting and encourage people to vote, ask them what their voting plan is, give them information about how to find their polling place, request an advance ballot, get information on what's going to be on their ballot, et cetera, et cetera. And so then by engaging in regular communication with your group of folks that you decide you want to engage with, for instance, maybe like 20 of my friends and family members, the idea is that then I will get and help make sure that those 20 people are getting to the polls through, again, regular communication. So that's another way that we are doing some of the GOTV work. And I should say that, when I was talking about the different components on the IVE wheel, I want to reiterate that the systems-based approach doesn't have any sort of less value on voter registration or GOTV work over anything else. All of the points are absolutely critical. And voter registration and get out the vote work is absolutely critical to CEP strategy as well. One of the things that we're not doing, though, is trying to reinvent the wheel, where organizations such as League of Women Voters and the Voter Network and EVP are already doing such good work. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel around that. We just want to support and amplify the good work that all of you are already doing. So thank you for doing all of that incredible work. You know, another component of the wheel is around developing strong leaders, and leadership is necessary for climate resilience for so many different reasons. One, we want people to step up and become leaders, but we also want people to take leadership roles in terms of, you know, asking for climate resilience and demanding climate resilience policies from their lawmakers, or engaging with lawmakers around that. And this is just a subtle reminder that leadership is not an actual position. It is just an activity, you know, to quote the Kansas Leadership Center. And so it's not about necessarily having a specific title. It's about how you show up in your communities day in and day out. And the Kansas Environmental Leadership Program that we use, or that we support, partners with Kansas Leadership Center, and we have sent 200 people, environmental leaders across the state of Kansas, to this high quality leadership training at Kansas Leadership Center, with the idea that by creating a kind of shared framework and shared set of language around leadership, we can tackle some of these really complex and complicated dynamics around finding solutions that will advance our work and advance climate resilience as a whole. Oops, I've lost my, great, there we go. You know, a couple of other parts on the wheel that we're working on is around public persuasion and engaging and educating the electorate. A lot of what we do is around providing education and information, be it around the impacts of climate, like climate impacts on public health, or maybe providing information that's happening during the legislative session about a particular statute or piece of legislation and how it may impact communities, or again, intervening at the KCC on a docket, or just elevating and amplifying the work that's being done around the state of Kansas and across the state of Kansas to preserve our wealth resources, and the really important critical work that our partners are doing, and amplify not just the work that they're doing, but how people can get involved in their work as well as ours. So a major component of this is talking to and providing educational opportunities for the electorate, so that people can learn what's going to move them, and then plug themselves in where they best see appropriate and where they feel most motivated to do so. You know, and all of this is going to have an impact on policy. We want to achieve policy impact, whether it's us intervening directly, or whether it's us getting more voters to the polls, or whether it's you know, building up leaders that then go on to run for office. All of these ways are how we are going to achieve policy impact in the long term. And again, it's very clear that this is not like a one-year program, right? We're talking about multi-year horizons in terms of the work that we're doing and how we're viewing this. And at the end of the day, it's about holding the electeds accountable, getting people into office that are going to support climate resilience and clean energy and the transition to clean energy, and then holding them accountable when their votes or their actions don't reflect maybe promises that they've made, or reflect what our communities have said is important to us. So I can stop right there for now and see if there's any other questions, Denise.
There aren't any other questions in the chat right now.
Okay, great. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is just basically the way that we're looking at this is kind of like a ladder of engagement. If you look down at the bottom, the beginning is like joining us as Kansas Climate Corps. And then there's various levels of commitment that you can plug yourself into based off of how you want to engage and where you want to engage in the system. So maybe the next step up would be signing the Environmental Voter Project, or the Kansas Climate Corps Pledge. Or maybe it's getting onto a webinar or learning a little bit more about some of the links between climate impacts and public health, or maybe specifically how climate impacts are happening inequitably across the state of Kansas based off of the various communities that you look at. Again, maybe a little bit more committed of an effort would be to intervene on a docket or submit testimony or submit a comment on an open docket at the Kansas Corporation Commission. And then maybe the next level up would be to sign up and become a voter-to-voter ambassador and start your team, or sign up to join another team or both, and start engaging your friends and family around making sure that they are getting to the polls, making sure that they're requesting their ballot, making sure they know how to find what's on the ballot and how to research what they see on that ballot. Phone banking is there, and it's got an asterisk around that, so I'll take this opportunity to speak a little bit about that. One of the opportunities that we also had with the Environmental Photo Project is to have offer and then support phone bank training to reach out to likely environmentalists across Kansas and try to get them to vote. That effort has been put on hold right now, thanks to a Kansas voter law that recently went into effect on the 1st of July. And I'm assuming that some of you, if not all of you, know a little bit about that voter law. But in a nutshell, there are various sections of the law, but in a nutshell, one of the things that it has done is it has criminalized or made possible to criminalize if you are mistaken for an election official. And so it has nothing necessary, the way that it's worded, it doesn't necessarily have to do anything with intent on whether or not you intended to impersonate an election official. It's just whether or not someone mistook you for it. So that has a lot of our partners, I believe, including the League of Women Voters, pausing some of their efforts, and it's caused us to pause ours around the phone banking while we see how this bears out in court. And there is both a court case that has been filed by some partners for an immediate stay around it, and we're going to see how that bears out before we continue the phone banking efforts. And the reason being, because like with voter to voter, for example, you're talking to your friends and family, they should know that you're not an election official. However, if we were to reach out to someone that we don't know at all, even if we have no intent, or even if we have a billion disclaimers saying, hey, I'm not an election official, I'm with a nonprofit, I'm a volunteer, someone could misconstrue that, or say that they misconstrue that, or say that they mistook us for an election official, and we could still be held accountable, potentially. And that's what we're trying to figure out and work through before we resume that or launch that effort. However, we really want to, because it's going to be a really cool thing when we can, in terms of driving some of those voters to the polls. The next level of engagement would be around engaging in the Kansas Environmental Leadership Program and getting some leadership training. Again, this is through the Kansas Leadership Center. It's really high quality training. And then, of course, if you really want to get engaged when it comes to civic participation, probably the ultimate pinnacle of commitment would be running for office. I'm definitely not there yet. But that's going to demonstrate a tremendous commitment in terms of your civic participation. And of course, at the top of that is just climate resilience and more effective policies that will transition us into clean energy as across the state and across the region and across the country. So, none of this is like all rainbows and unicorns, right? There's definitely challenges to it, but there's also the reason why and that we're doing it, and that's why we continue to do it. So it is hard work. It can be messy. You can have kind of one influence on the system and then opens up a whole nother kind of can of worms, so to speak. And then you have to pivot and look at that and say, okay, now what do we do? So it is very cyclical in that respect. But it has the opportunity to create and support continuous engagement. And it also allows us to operationalize our work. And I mentioned that earlier, it's so critical to everything that we do. We can layer this integrated voter engagement lens over it and really embed this work into every aspect of all of the other work that we're doing, whether it be in policy, whether it be around public health and engagement with our communities, whether it be around our equity work. I mean, it all goes back to, or can be related to, the importance of civic engagement around it. And it requires professional development. So we're constantly investing in ourselves as a staff and providing leadership development opportunities for the board, as well as for our partners and their staff. We definitely subscribe to the idea that we want to raise all boats together. So whenever we have an opportunity to engage in professional development of our own or leadership development, we always do our best to try to offer it to our peer and partner organizations. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that none of this would be possible if it weren't for really strong and empowered leadership within the organization, both from our executive director, Dorothy Barnett, and the assistant director, Rachel McSlivy, and our board as well. They all have tremendous, like, forward thinking. They employ like a really forward thinking lens on all of this work. And without that support and without that kind of empowerment, none of this work would be possible. So it's really critical, and we're really grateful to have them at the helm. There's like different ways to get engaged. You could become a Kansas Climate Corps member, and then you could sign the pledge, and then you could engage in some relational organizing through voter to voter, or you could intervene in the docket. Or if you're interested, you can contact me for some more information about Kansas environmental leadership and how to get involved with that. So at that, I want to say one last thing. Again, the Kansas Health Foundation has funded this IVE work and has made all of this possible with their support through the IVE cohort. And on that note, I'm ready to take any questions or to dig into anything else that we might want to do. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sarah. I was wondering, who are some of the table partner groups in Kansas that you mentioned that you
for the Kansas State Wealth Table for the REAMP network? Yeah, so it's going to be a lot of our it's going to be some of our wealth partners. So for instance, the like Friends of the Cause, there's going to be public health partners, there's going to be you know, if I can give me just a second and I'll actually pull up the list of who we have on board so far. I think I stopped screen sharing, right? So you're not going to see my 50,000 windows that are open.
Hey, Sarah, this is Kay. Are the wealth partners the ones that were in the past? Because League of Women Voters Douglas County participated in wealth and had a table in the past when we were doing in-person wealth day at the Capitol.
Yes. So that's definitely, so the wealth partnership, you know, one of the things that we do obviously is that wealth day of advocacy. The Kansas State table is going to be open to all of those partners as well as more. So I can send, I don't know, Kay, if you want me to send the information to you and Denise, and then make sure, and then you can matriculate it through League of Women Voters as you see.
I would send it to Denise or Emily, either one.
Okay, I can send it to both of them then. And you know what we're doing, it'll provide a little bit more information about the state table itself and what it's going to look like. And there's a meet and greet in the beginning of August, and then as partner organizations come on, there's going to be a strategy setting session. I want to say maybe late August or the beginning of September, and that's all going to look at. I'm having a tough time finding this document, but I'll keep looking for it while we're talking. So, and you know, and in that, we're going to be asking our partners that sign on, hey, who else isn't at the table that needs to be, or that should be at the table? So there's going to be agricultural organizations. There's going to be any organizations that support our wealth resources. We're going to have some public health organizations that are signing on. And I do believe that there may also be some businesses that sign on. I'm not 100% sure on that. I'm not the full lead on that. That's Beth Polly, but I can connect you with Beth Polly as well and give you some of that information.
So are you referring to Clean Energy Business Council partners that Beth is?
Right. You know, so I'm not sure if the Clean Energy Business Council partners are going to be part of the Wealth State table. Something that I'm not 100% clear on that is whether businesses are part of the REAMP network. I think that they can be. And so in that case, they would also be asked if they want to join. And I think Beth is just in the initial phases of starting to do some of the outreach around inviting organizations to the state table. So what I was hoping to look for and hoping to find was look at some of the organizations, because I don't have it off the top of my head, the organizations that we were seeking, like intentionally seeking out. And I was looking for that document and I can't seem to find it right now. But as we reach out to those organizations, we're going to be asking them like, hey, is there anyone else in your networks that might not be in ours that should also be at the table? So we're just in the very initial phases of starting that outreach and starting to kind of convene some of the partners. And I can send that information. Let me make a note of that. I'll send that information to Denise and to Emily so that you all can matriculate it up as you see fit.
Fabulous. That would be great.
Yeah.
Sarah, this is Seal King. You were talking
Hi.
about your organization pausing the phone banking because of the lawsuit, and you mentioned that you were partners with one of the organizations suing. What was the League of Women Voters, Kansas Appleseed, Loud Light, and Topeka Independent Living.
Yep.
Those are the 4 organizations. So which one of those is CEP directly related to that is, or is a partner with that you paused this?
It's not that we are partners with them and that's why we paused. It's just that we look at you all and the work that you do as tangential to the work that we do. And if you all are pausing your work, then that gave us cause for like, okay, hey, maybe we need to stop and look at this as well and what we're doing. And our legal team has thus far, I'll be honest with you, Dorothy was pretty transparent in some of the initial conversations, thinking that perhaps it didn't necessarily apply to the work that we're doing. And for example, like I've had some conversations with the Environmental Voter Project and with the Voter Network, and it doesn't look like they're pausing their work. They don't seem to be as concerned about their exposure, but our legal team has advised us that we should pause until we see how it bears out and how that lawsuit bears out. Like for example, I'm not gonna lie, I was really surprised when I saw that Loud Light had paused its efforts. Loud Light is, and League of Women Voters, I think that at first when we saw Loud Light pausing, we were like, okay, that makes sense, but it's surprising, but it makes sense. When we saw you all pausing some of your efforts, we thought, okay, then maybe this is a little bit more, we need to be taking this a little bit more seriously and make sure that we're really crossing our T's and dotting our I's around what kind of exposure this could create for us in the work that we're doing. So we're going to continue on with the relational organizing, and we're going to continue on with some of the other levers in the integrated voter engagement approach. But that specific one around phone banking and the get out the vote work, we're pausing for right now. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that helps. I know we had, it was our attorneys, because I'm on the state board, it was our attorneys that said that we should pause that, and especially while we're looking at the injunction, or requesting for an injunction. And we had to give a list of all the activities that we had planned for this month, next month, and submit those to the lawsuit so that the judge could see all the activities that we actually are not doing. And I wondered if you folks had been asked to make a list of what you had planned that might also go into that attorney's information for the injunction.
We haven't been asked to make a list, but I think that's probably because we aren't actually participating in the lawsuit itself. However, if that's something that you think or that your legal team thinks would help, in terms of like other organizations listing out some of the activities that they're stopping as well because of this, I would say definitely let us know, and we would be happy to do something of that sort.
Okay. Do you know any other organizations that are doing the same thing, pausing?
So I don't know off the top of my head exactly what other organizations have officially paused their efforts. I will say that, we escalated this to the Kansas Health Foundation and to the IVE cohort because we got the funding from them in 2017 to start. And then we actually are getting ready we actually just kind of started a new round. We're calling it phase 2 of IVE, and it's with many of the same original IVE partners in that cohort. I mentioned there was like 9 partners. It's many of those same original ones. And we actually elevated it to our program officer at KHF to see, okay, how does KHF feel about this? What are the other partners doing about it? And so we're getting ready to have a series of conversations starting at the beginning of August to more fully explore that. And we can keep you updated on that, because there's a good possibility that some of them are going to, you know, that might be stalling their work or pausing on their work as well. And we can keep you abreast of that information if you'd like for us to.
Well, that'd be great.
Yeah, would you
Laura
send me an email, and then I can make sure that, or maybe just send Dorothy. Do you have Dorothy's contact information?
Yes, I should.
You know what I can do? I'll send you an email and I'll copy Dorothy, or I'll send Dorothy an email and copy you, so that we can just make sure that we're keeping each other in the loop about what's going on.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, actually, I've heard, you talk a lot about what you're doing. Quite frankly, I find Kansas totally hopeless. So tell me something positive. Has anything happened that you're encouraged by? Have you seen any positive outcomes or anything recently?
Yes, and yes. Yes, I wholeheartely agree with you. Yes, I think that this is one of the reasons that the work needs to continue to be done. A couple of different things that I think are really encouraging, and that is at a national level, we're starting to see more conversation on a federal level about the impacts of climate change on public health, the impacts of climate change and on the economy, and the impacts of the potential impacts that transitioning to clean energy can have overall for us. And having that kind of national dialogue that's happening can have some really tremendous benefits. I mean, forgive me for saying this. This is Sarah speaking and not CEP speaking. That can have some really tremendous benefits where we're actually seeing a trickle down effect. And so what I have hoped for, and what really kind of gives me some hope, is that we have already done a lot of work. I mean, the carbon emissions have been reduced by 40% since 2001 because of the clean energy production with wind, for example. Solar has an absolutely incredible potential, and we're having those conversations and starting to work. And some of those scales are starting to be tipped a little bit in terms of public perception, in terms of buy-in, and it's only going to, I think, tip further as we have the validity, if you will, of the national dialogue happening. So that can kind of validate it a little bit more and put a little bit more oomph behind what's happening here. Now, does that mean that it's all unicorns and rainbows? Absolutely not, right? I mean, we have to be realistic about it. But we are seeing a lot of emphasis in that and a lot of momentum around that. The other thing I want to say is that we're also seeing a tremendous momentum with youth happening. And when you talk about the youth being literally the future of our nation, they are, and they're very engaged around climate health, climate impact, clean energy transition. And so that gives me a whole lot of, and we're seeing some really cool leadership articulations that youth are engaging in, both within CEP as well as across the state and across the nation. And that definitely gives me some hope too. But that's a great question, Janice. Thank you.
Hey, Sarah, this is Kay. I'd also like to add, in Kansas, there's a significant success with the Kansas Supreme Court and all the efforts that CEP did regarding the solar punitive fee that Evergy insisted upon, and the Kansas Supreme Court revoked that. And so there are really efforts going on in Kansas as well as nationally. And, a lot of it is because of CEP and Clean Energy and other partners. But, it takes a village, right? So, and the more people that we can get involved, the better. And I really like the effort, and I am a total proponent of the opportunity to engage communication regarding, climate actions and voting, because so many people really do care about the environment and the climate issues. And if you can get them to the polls, that's the key, because so often I'm in situations where younger people will say, well, just make people do this or make people do that. And you said, you can't make people do this. We have to have leaders that are in elected positions to help guide these actions. And, part of it is people don't even understand the civic process. And it is frustrating that so many educational systems have broken down regarding that we have to go outside the education process to educate people about how how our government works locally as well as state and federal. And local and state are actually more important than the federal.
Yeah, amen.
Because that affects every day, everybody that living in Kansas. It's interesting what's going on in Texas and Arkansas, but we first have to pay attention to what's going on in Kansas.
Right. And something interesting that you said, talking about the impact that your local and state legislation can have and county level legislation can have on you and your lived experience. I mean, that's like where you see the impact is what's happening locally. And if you think about how much impact they can have on you and then how low voter turnout usually is for them, when you put those two together, if you can impact voter turnout around those local elections, in these odd numbered years, if you will, that's where you can really see an impact on policy that's being made that's going to show up in your everyday life in terms of how it affects you. And so that right there is another kind of, for me, something to hang the hat on. But I appreciate, Kay, you raising the work that's been done around the solar and the punitive solar damages, and the efforts that have been successful in the past. That gives us fodder to continue to move forward. But I want to also acknowledge that we are over time, so I don't want to. I'm happy to take more questions. I'm happy to sit on a little bit longer if anyone has some more questions. But I also want to be respectful of time.
If we do have just another moment, I will tell you for a fact, 2 weeks ago, I was on a climate discussion call with professors, and one of the professors who's very actively involved in climate change told me, I'm not involved in politics. She didn't tell me, she told the whole group. And it just really got me, because
she said that she wasn't involved in politics.
She wasn't involved in politics, that she doesn't actively engage in politics. And I will call that individual because I know what her name is. But I was really surprised that even scientists don't make that connection.
Right. And sometimes people aren't making that connection, and let's be honest, some people have given up on that connection or on their voice matter, like my voice doesn't matter, it's just one vote. But if you get enough of your friends that believe the same things that you do to all show up, like that does have an impact. And again, just talking about, if you can increase voter turnout by 1% in a local election, it can be 1 percentage point, but that could be the difference. That could be like a 25% swing, right? So that's critical. And another thing is that sometimes if you're looking at it as, how do I say this? If you're looking at, like, for instance, that professor, what they're doing is, I'm not involved in politics because I don't go vote is one thing. But what's interesting is that they're absolutely involved from an integrated voter engagement perspective or a systems-based perspective. They're absolutely involved because they're educating the electorate.
Yes.
And they're, and they're probably, if they're on a climate change panel of some sort, they are also possibly providing input and advocacy around, different initiatives that are maybe being created at a local level or in municipalities or a county level. And so they're absolutely, you know, very involved in politics, whether they want to be or not. I mean, we all are to a degree, right? However much we want to own, however much of that we want to own. So, no, but I appreciate you saying that. And how did you respond? Can I ask?
I know. I'm very interested, and I am going to set up a telephone conversation with this gal.
That's awesome. And, you know, and that right there is what I was talking about, you know, leadership being an activity and not a position. Like, that's a tremendous act of leadership on your part to hear that, for it to ping you and be like, whoa, and then to have a follow-up conversation to dig deeper into that and potentially, you know, hopefully move the needle on that person and help them understand the connections and help them engage maybe more deeply in civic participation. I think that's awesome. So thank you. Thanks for everything you do.
Sure.
That's some great work. Is there anything else?
And muted me. Well, thanks so much, Sarah, for your time today. Really fascinating presentation.
Thanks,
Lots
Penny.
to work with. This recording, thank God we remembered it in time, will be posted on our website and on our, I think we're doing the new videos we're recording now for Hot Topics on our website. So look for it there. Also, the August 26th Hot Topic will also be at another funny time. So be watching the website for that. And I'll put more information about our next Hot Topic soon. So thanks so much for everybody who came today. And thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, everyone. I really enjoyed it.